Versailles. Versailles, the richest and most famous palace in the Western world, stands today in all its glory, just as it did in the time when the French monarchs lived here during the 17th and 18th centuries. Versailles symbolizes the mentality of these kings, when being king was considered a profession. The perfect palace had to be provided as a stage for their royal performances. Surprisingly, the palace survived the widespread destruction of the French Revolution and the past 2 centuries as well, even through 2 world wars. Preserved by wealthy benefactors and the love and contributions of the French people, it has been refurbished very nearly to its original state. Its gardens have been replanted. As the millions of tourists who visit Versailles step through its royal gates, they become transported into another time, an era of frivolous pretense which clouded the real problems of the country and its inhabitants. A place of timeless beauty, this structure enchants its visitors and leaves a lasting impression upon them. Today, Versailles receives nothing but praise, but before it had actually been built, the idea of the palace itself drew much opposition from the French aristocracy, especially concerning the choice of its location. Selected by its builder, Louis XIV. At the start of the 17th century, Versailles was nothing more than a tiny village in the midst of marshland and woods which abounded in wild game. Indeed, the area had been described as the gloomiest and most thankless of places, without view, without water, without soil. The young sovereign had always been charmed with the hunting lodge and grounds around Versailles, which belonged to his father. He treasured memories of visits there as a small child. Many were amazed and critical of King Louis XIV's ambitious decision to build a magnificent residence there for himself and his court. Ever since Louis had come to the throne at age 5, he had been secretly making plans for a palace of his own. As a child, Louis lived under the direction of Cardinal Mazarin, who ruled after the death of his father. Mazarin was in control until the boy was old enough to reign himself. They lived in the luxurious Palais Royal, located in the heart of Paris. Ironically, while living in this spectacular mansion, Louis was forced to economize to a ridiculous extent, residing in cramped, sparsely furnished quarters, and wearing clothes which were much too small for him. Perhaps these early restrictions were the key to his complete extravagance in later life. After his 23rd birthday, Louis began to rule France for himself. Not long after this, he attended a party at the newly constructed Vaux-le-Vicomte, the luxurious chateau belonging to his Minister of Finance, Nicolas Fouquet. At first, Louis was delighted with the opulent decor. However, his enchantment soon changed to anger, jealousy, and disgust as he feasted his eyes on the beauty of each room. Erased were all doubts as to the validity of the rumors that Fouquet had embezzled funds from the French government. The opulent decor and magnificent gardens confirmed all suspicion. Fouquet would be dealt with severely. Determined to outdo Fouquet, he began to put his plans into action for an even more impressive home. At this time, Louis stubbornly ignored pleas to pay more attention to the Louvre, the traditional palace of the kings of France. Instead, he devoted all of his time to planning the construction of Versailles Palace and its various outbuildings. He hired the same men who had created Vaux-le-Vicomte to design a palace for him that would become the envy of all Europe. Louis Le Vaux was the architect, Charles Le Brun, the artist, and André Le Nôtre, the landscape designer. Later, Jules Ardouin Mansart would take Le Vaux's place as master architect. When the location for the project was revealed, Louis's advisors became critics. Versailles was all shifting sand and marsh with no water supply. Certainly not a fit foundation for a structure of that size. And how could water be adequately supplied for all the fountains that were demanded by the king? No matter how many flaws were discovered in Louis's eccentric plans, he simply would not be discouraged. Work began in 1661, and the king was to spare no expense. For the next 50 years, he supervised the draining of marshes, tapping of water sources, construction of buildings, and laying out of gardens. To complete the palace, over 36,000 workers labored under hazardous conditions. Swarms of malaria-infected mosquitoes plagued the men, causing many of them to die every day. The cartloads of dead people that had to be removed each night were described only as an inconvenience by the nobility. To the king, the workers were as expendable as soldiers. He lacked an understanding of the common people and had no sympathy for their hardships. On May 6, 1682, when the palace finally became habitable, Louis and his court moved in, and Versailles was officially proclaimed the seat of the French government. In addition to the king and the royal family, 1,000 great lords and ladies, 5,000 servants, and 9,000 soldiers lived in the palace. A 1,000 more courtiers frequented the environs in hopes of favors, riches, and position, things which depended solely on recognition by His Majesty. Louis carefully selected the most beautiful ladies to be members of his court. The hairstyles of these women often served as a source of humor for critics of the day. The king also sought the most brilliant and dazzling wits of the kingdom to surround him. Staging lavish and colorful entertainments kept the entourage amused and distracted from thoughts of political dissension. Louis drew the great nobles to his court, where they wasted their money away in order to meet the demands of fashion, protocol, and entertainment such as gambling. The court etiquette at Versailles was almost like a ridiculous art. Hundreds of tiny do's and don'ts had to be learned in order to avoid social disgrace. One had to scratch at the door with a little finger instead of knocking. Bowing to the king's food as it went past was a must. Conversation had to change from informal to formal French when the king entered a room. Rules like these succeeded in keeping the minds of the courtiers free from any ideas of dissatisfaction with the government by making them feel self-conscious and nervous about their own behavior. Yet Versailles remained the most desirable place to live in all of France. It was the only place that a person could advance, either socially or politically. To be banished from the palace, condemned to a life of boredom and insignificance, was for many the worst punishment imaginable. As Louis had predicted, the intimidated nobility reacted by falling into their respective places in orbit around their shining sun king. The king's days were regulated to the minutest detail by the precise laws of etiquette. His every action or gesture was cause enough for a ceremony. The king ate his meals with an audience of courtiers surrounding him. Ceremonies of dressing and undressing were held at 8 a.m. and midnight in His Majesty's bedchamber. Privileged nobles stood behind a balustrade and held out garments for him as he dressed. The Queen's bedroom was the main room of her apartment. It was here the royal children were born, with a crowd of the great men of the kingdom as spectators, even during the most difficult deliveries. In this manner, the identity of the royal children was certified. The apartments of the king and queen were connected by the famous Hall of Mirrors, which was used for princely weddings, receptions for important ambassadors, and the most splendid festivals. At night, the light of 3,000 candles illuminated and glorified the beauty of the walkway. Versailles became a symbol of refined culture in Europe. The glory of the palace was enhanced by exquisite marble, seen both inside and out. Dazzling gold leaf accented every corner of the palace. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, adding a glistening shimmer to each room. Lavish furniture, worthy of this setting, was designed by the finest craftsmen. Frescoes adorned the ceilings. World-famous artists were commissioned for the many paintings. Intricate tapestries and carpets represented months of painstaking labor. Rooms were furnished in such a way as to allow for all of the ceremonial bowing, which was such an important day-to-day ritual. Professing to be a devout Catholic, Louis attended Mass at noon each day in his chapel. This religious building was also a main center of court gossip. When his religious obligations were finished at 1 p.m., he would visit his current mistress until 2 p.m., when it was time to go hunting. Louis had such a passionate love of the hunt that even when he could no longer ride a horse, he had his men carry him in a chair alongside the other riders. For 20 years, Louis had taken ballet lessons and became an excellent dancer. While still in his youth, he performed the role of the sun in the 13-hour ballet of the night, and afterwards he adopted the sun as his personal symbol. He explained his decision by saying, "I choose to assume the form of the sun because of the unique quality of the radiance that surrounds it, the light it imparts to other stars, which compose a kind of court, and that constant, invariable course from which it never deviates or diverges." This explains the many representations of the Greek sun god Apollo, which appear throughout the palace. Louis also portrayed himself as a warrior king. During his reign, he supported several military campaigns in his attempts to expand French borders. Seeking refuge from the demanding public eye, Louis built the Grand Trianon on the grounds as a private, informal residence. Here he could escape his rigid schedule of social obligations and relax more intimately with friends. Around the Grand Trianon, 400 gardeners were constantly at work, often replacing the king's favorite flowers, tulips, 3 times a day when a color change was needed to fit the occasion. Louis loved strolling in the gardens of the Orangerie, where some 2,000 orange trees grew. Here he pursued quiet, intellectual thought. Throughout the many gardens, there were numerous statues of mythological figures. The faces of some of these figures bore an uncanny resemblance to Louis's mistresses. Louis demanded as many as 1,400 fountains. The water supply was never sufficient to keep all of them constantly at play. The gardeners turned them on as he approached and off after he passed by. The stagnant water often caused the air at Versailles to become a serious health threat. One hot August, almost everyone except the king himself became ill from breathing the foul air. There were health hazards and unpleasant odors within the palace walls as well. In spite of the appearance of luxury, inhabitants had to contend with the lack of plumbing and toilet facilities. Water was brought in by the servants for the rare act of bathing. Since there were very few chamber pots in the palace, only enough for a handful of royalty, everyone else had to improvise, using gardens, sequestered stairways, and dark corners within the palace as bathroom facilities. After a number of years, the odor became quite overwhelming. Other problems arose also. Louis detested homosexuality, yet it was much the fashion for the young men of the court. They preferred the intimate company of each other rather than that of the ladies, who they complained were extremely promiscuous. Louis finally succumbed to a combination of old age, overeating, and the medical treatment given to him by the doctors of the 17th century. On his deathbed, he cautioned his 5-year-old great-grandson, the Dauphin, who was to be the next king, against engaging in war and extravagance. After a reign of 72 years, the Sun King died on September 1st, 1715, of gangrene poisoning.